And so you kind of went into it kind of hopeful, excited, but, just kind of a little bit cautious too, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then when did things start changing?
So we had a TV. It's not often that they don't allow us to have a TV at that time in the main pharmacy. The hospital pharmacy at Tulane, and it's like this in many hospital pharmacies. And keep in mind, New Orleans, it's an older building. It's the city has age, the buildings have age. The pharmacy's pretty much in the basement on the first floor on the lowest level. And so we're isolated from almost like the outside world, and it needs to be that way because pharmacy has narcotics, it has a lot of important medications, hazardous chemotherapy. So it's really kind of a building that's walled off that not many people know about. So they did put a TV out there, so we had information coming in to us on what's going on, and we had Channel 4 on. And Sally Ann Roberts, who many people from New Orleans know that name because she's a news broadcaster that has been there for a while, was giving the updates. And so we could see the scenes or start hearing, knowing all the preparation that's going on, and we had awareness when the hurricane was really getting closer. We were just preparing, working as hard as we could to get all the medications filled and getting everything prepared for the patients.
And the hospital, so this is Tulane Medical Center, right, in New Orleans, right?
That's right.
And that they have generators there?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
And hospitals they do, disaster preparation tests. They do generator tests. They have all the equipment that should be necessary to survive these storms, which again gives hope and gives confidence as you work these shifts.
Right. Okay. And I think what was that? I think did you have to directly check on the generator at one point yourself?
I like to be aware of where things are, so I knew where they were located.
Uh-huh.
For me, one of the things I did was I just did a quick walkthrough with the pharmacy to make sure the essential, in a hospital, you have these red plugs that when a generator does kick on, they have power going to them. Mm-hmm. And not every outlet may have that. So I verified that the PCs and the essential equipment in the IV room had those, were connected to the right plugs. So I did that sort of check and assessment, and then continued to work away. I believe I was doing order entry at that time, which is basically receiving orders from the physicians and putting them in. And so in the background, as I'm putting in orders, answering phone calls, you can hear anxiety from nursing as well as they're trying to get things situated. I was just trying to be calm and collected.
Yeah, it sounds like you're trying to help out, right, as much as you can. Because that was one of the things that I really respect and appreciate about your story too, is that all the different hats that you were wearing throughout this process, right? Which is really commendable because, nowadays a lot of people will say things like, oh, that's not my part of my job. That's not my part of my job description, right? But the way you went above and beyond, it was definitely is an amazing thing to hear about. So to tell us how the hurricane progressed.
So a lot of the updates I received were coming initially from the news source, from Channel 4. And so Sally Ann, I remember it started to become nightfall, and it was, after, probably after 9 or 10. And Sally Ann, they were giving preparations, have your acts ready. If you haven't evacuated, now is the time to prepare for the worst. And you may not, they said this out loud, if you're hearing this and you're in the city of New Orleans, you may not make it out alive.
And the significance, so for people like myself who are not from New Orleans, Louisiana, right? I didn't really understand what the significance of the acts was, but tell us what the purpose of the acts is.
So we recognize that we are very prone to flooding. And, we've heard just through stories that if, God forbid, a levee breaks or a levee is toppled, you're going to have the city flooded in a heartbeat. And so the news station and people recognize that if you get flooded and you're inside your home, the only thing you can do is go up, which is drop down your ladder and climb into your attic. And if the water keeps rising and you're in your attic without a way to get out, you can imagine what would happen. That's not a good way to go.
Right. So the axe is actually used to break through that roof.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So very surreal. It's hard to imagine, but that scenario really did happen during Katrina.
Mm-hmm.
And so Sally Ann then mentioned that they are at a point where their executives would not they have to evacuate and they have to power down. So they said a prayer to whoever was listening at that point and said, God be with you. And they again made that statement, you may not be alive if you stayed in the city, but God be with you. And then it went to a black screen, almost like you see on television where the screen starts turning black from top and bottom, and it just goes to a thin line and then a little dot. And I remember just staring at the screen till it just all went black.
Wow. And this was how many hours after you had got there?
And this was within my shift, probably within 4 hours, 4 to 6 hours of me being on my shift.
Okay. And do you ever recall like a newscaster saying something like that before?
Never.
So that was that like an alarm or a red flag in some way?
Absolutely. I knew that I was entering something that I've never experienced before and that I will never forget.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. And then, wow. Yeah. I can't even imagine what that must have been like, right? I mean, basically a newscaster coming on and saying, God be with you, right? I mean, that sounds like a last day kind of thing, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What kind of thoughts were going through your head? And also the people who were watching that along with you, what kind of atmosphere did that become like?
Yeah. Everyone was, we all were just looking at each other and the pharmacy was silent. Mm. And then, I'll be honest with you, after that, we all recognized that we had a job to do. So I just went back to working and then, we all just started plugging away with what we needed to do. I remember getting to a point where I was, situated, got the orders caught up, and I was able to kind of sometimes I'll do rounds to just check on the units around. ER was down the hallway, nursing units were, up the stairs. So I ran up and did kind of a quick well check. And there was definitely a lot of anxiety around the hospital. Patients were still there. The hospital still had a lot of patients. There wasn't time to evacuate the patients. So
where would they have normally, like if there was enough time, would they have been transferred to where to a different hospital or?
Likely so. They would, maybe go up north to Alexandria or transfer to another facility. Sometimes airlift. Sometimes, if they can get ambulanced out, they would do that.
Right. Okay. And so while you're there, at some point, the electricity went out, right?
That's right. That's correct. And so, yeah, later on in that shift, you can tell the lights all went dark for a second, computers all blanked out, and then you hear the generator kick on, and then you basically have half lighting, and then you have, your system's power back up, and then you do a quick check to make sure, refrigerators are working, things are back up and running because there are critical products in there that need to continue to work.
Mm-hmm. And I remember you mentioned that you can still like even think and just smell like, you can think about and just smell that generator, what that generator smelled like or the sound of it, right?
That's right. And that brings up a good point because the generators were on the first floor, same level as us, in the back of the hospital. Mm-hmm. So when those generators kick on, you can feel it for a second. And then when you walk the hallways, you can smell some of the fumes. Although, you're not supposed to have it, it's vented out, but you can still tell, you can smell there are fumes in there from that.
Right. So, I mean, kind of like that atmosphere right before, your eyes, it was just changing, right? Electricity goes out, generators kick in, there's a smell. And you had mentioned that the emergency lights kick in too, right?
That's right.
And so everything kind of goes dark in a way.
Exactly.
And you just have like a night light, basically.
Right, just very minimal lighting around and the light of your computer screen. And so, again, it kind of takes it to another level when that happens. And
right.
You just know that you're getting closer to, the event.
Mm-hmm.
The storm really lasted quite a while because Katrina was such a large storm. You can have a storm, both two storms that have the same miles per hour, the same wind or category. But when you have a storm like Katrina, the force of the winds was quite far out from the eye wall. So you had a storm that would stretch 100 miles, 120, 200 miles outside of the eye wall. So the impact, comes on sooner and lasts much longer. So I remember finishing up my shift and I was able to go to the floors. I worked the night shift and I was able to go to the floors and check on the nurses and see what was going on. And it was you could see at that point, things were really intense. At that point, we should have been, probably 4 to 6 hours away from landfall. But even at that point, you could see the intense winds just whipping outside. You can see it was just a force of wind that I've never seen. It wasn't, vertical. It wasn't like left to right. It was just beating down like pressure washing. And so I remember being on the upper floors and seeing the force of the winds just pushing down, and then the force just bouncing back up because it had nowhere else to go.
Wow. So the wind's actually coming from above downwards. Yeah. I mean, I've never experienced that kind of wind. So what does that even look like?
Because we're in the heart of the city, you have buildings all around you. And so it's just wind is just getting pushed in from wherever it can come in from. And so, on the outside perimeter of the hospital walls you could actually feel the windows shaking and pulsating. Wow. And so they actually had to move patients from their room into the hallways because it was unsafe. They didn't know if the windows were going to blow out.
Wow. So patients actually had to be removed from their rooms where they have their convenience and comfort and maybe, all the supplies they need. Now everybody's going into the hallway.
That's right.
Wow. Okay. What was that? Do you remember or recall that feeling that some of these patients might have been having, or things that they were maybe saying, or?
Yes, you can see the anxiety or the worry they had, but it was also the helplessness because they're laying in a hospital bed, helpless to what's going on around them.
And alone too, right?
And alone.
No family, no friends, right?
That's right. And they'd had to move their IV poles and everything and just basically get set up inside the hallway. And there was so much uncertainty because, again, we were seeing the windows shaking, and at a certain point, you would start seeing windows blowing out across on buildings across from us.
Oh, wow.
So that hotel room that I was staying at, I remember seeing that hotel, and I was starting to see windows just explode out. And then once the window would explode, everything in that room would get sucked out. Just like you would, see on like a movie, if an airplane window bursts,
right,
everything gets sucked out. There was so much pressure that everything just gets sucked out of there, and you just see the curtains whipping outside the window.
Wow.
And so you just wonder, is this going to happen here? And I remember walking up to that window, finally built up the courage to walk up and went into the patient room and just you can feel the entire walls just vibrating, moving back and forth. And you just didn't know if that was going to blow and how it was going to hold up.
Wow. But did they hold up at the hospital?
They did.
They did? Well,
they did.
Thank God.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank God for that.
Yeah. And then, so you actually were witnessing all kinds of things flying out of rooms from across the street.
That's right. And then as the rain became heavier, you can see water starting to collect on the streets below. And it would just slowly get higher and higher. And at one point, you could see that waves started developing. And you could see whitecaps on top of those waves. So water would rise. It became like a river on the street. And then it looked like a river with like you're just in a river, cross river, with all the waters filling up and the wind blowing.
Wow. Yeah. And so what was going through your mind at that point? So right before I ask you that question, had you ever experienced a hurricane to that degree before?
Never.
The winds or things, being the windows blowing out, or, the items being sucked out of these rooms and onto the streets. You'd never experienced that?
Never. Nothing like that.
And how many hurricanes have you been through, maybe?
I would say at least 6 to 8.
6 to 8, right? Yes. And so this was definitely the big one.
This was the big one. Mm-hmm. And it just was the combination of a lot of different factors. But seeing that happen, I was starting to see, I remember there was a restaurant bar across the street. I saw the corner of the tiles starting to pick up, the shingles pick up, and then all of a sudden that corner of the roof just rips up and you just see it flying, God knows where.
Yeah.
And just, they had on Canal Street all these beautiful palm trees. You would see palm trees line the street in New Orleans. I kid you not, they started shooting out of the ground like rockets straight up. And they were just from all the pressure. It didn't blow down. It would just get ripped up and just go straight into the air. It was like nothing I've ever experienced. The intensity, the sounds, the wind, it was just an amazing event to see.
So even now when you're thinking about this, does it feel like it just happened, like almost like yesterday in a way?
It does.
It does. Huh?
It does.
It's that vivid, huh?
It is.
It's like ingrained in you at this point, right?
You can't forget something like that. It just felt like you were